Hi everyone, great, and Andreas just ruined my whole intro. I was going to talk like, how many people here spoke about Trump at lunch? But now we like kill that. So how many of you spoke about defense at lunch? A few of you, yeah, great. And I'm going to stand here, otherwise I can't see you guys. Obviously, fantastic panel. I have like, David Dana here from the EIF, who's going to tell us more about what you do in defense, and Sebastian from Ribbentrop, who's a defense tech investor for JOIN.CAPITAL, founding partner, and obviously Patrick Schneider-Sikorsky, partner at NATO Innovation Fund. And for me, I'm Europe editor at Sifted, and we are European tech media, and we have been writing about defense for maybe 2 years, quite a lot. And in the beginning, everyone was saying, no, we don't care about defense. We don't want to invest in it. We don't want anything to do with it. And now, as Andreas was saying as well, yes, defense is definitely one of those areas where the limited partner seems to care more about it. The family offices are definitely into it. And specific VCs, maybe not general VCs as much as yet. But this is probably a little bit to do with the NATO Innovation Fund opening a 1 billion euro fund to actually invest in startups across mainly Europe. So, Patrick, should we just start with you? What has happened? And why did this even NATO Innovation Fund come around? And where are we now? Is it on?
It's on now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Tech investors, give them a hand.
Thank you. Yes, so the NATO Innovation Fund was conceived by NATO several years ago, actually prior to the war in Ukraine. So it came about when the innovation unit at NATO was looking at some of the critical technology areas that can be applied to Europe's and the alliance's collective defense, security, and resilience. And they realized that there was great tech talent in Europe, and there were great opportunities to maintain and increase our edge over strategic competitors and adversaries, but it required more capital in the ecosystem. So the fund was really set up with multiple goals, but one of them was to enhance this dual-use ecosystem in Europe. More specifically, NATO identified nine strategic technology areas, which are called EDTs. So those are everything from AI and autonomous systems to quantum, to space, to biotech, materials, everything that you would categorize as deep tech and dual use. So that's how it got started. The goals of the fund are obviously financial, to deliver a return to the taxpayers and to the various governments that have invested in the fund, but also what our North Star is really the adoption of these technologies by government. So whenever we look at a startup, we look at its dual use application, and there has to be a strong demand signal or a strong use case from the defense and security community. Yeah. Then we have a third kind of pillar which we would describe as resilience. So that's things like supply chain security, energy security, even public health, food security, and so on, which might not be directly immediately adopted by government, but has an impact on our security and on geopolitics.
And I suppose since NATO Innovation Fund was kind of started off, and it's been lots about it in tech media, about NATO Innovation Fund, and also in other medias. But the EIF, you have seen an increase, right, from VCs who want to get into defense and wants funding for the kind of. What do you say, David?
Yes, indeed. And maybe to explain why we've been focusing on defense tech now for a couple of years. So for those who don't know us, we're a European institution and a big fund. We are actively investing in the VC ecosystem across Europe, on average 3.5 billion euros a year of new commitments, so quite massive. But the money we are investing is channeled to us through different sources, and not in a vehicle, but through kind of mandates. And the biggest part comes from the European Commission. So it's very much aligned on what the European Union, through the European Commission and through us, decides to focus on for the coming 6 to 7 years, which is the typical lifetime of the budgets. And defense tech has been identified, I would say, alongside a number of other topics in deep tech, generally speaking. And it became very clear, actually, during the period of COVID, that Europe was dependent on many other entities for lots of things, lots of topics. We were not so sovereign. We were lacking a lot of resources on the continent. And then a number of sectors have been identified as being strategic, including defense. And why are we talking more now about that? It's because, first of all, the geopolitical context with the war in Ukraine, the war between Israel and Hamas, and all that kind of things, where we realize that if, first of all, that war is very close to Europe, and if there was to be a conflict involving European countries, we would be able to survive on our reserves for a couple of days at best. So we need more autonomy, capacity, resilience, and everything which will help European countries to be able to defend themselves. And of course, innovation in this area is key. Where would it come from? From innovation. And innovation is mainly done by the smaller companies, SMEs, which are not yet related to the big corporates and things like that. Not that corporates do not innovate, but on that, specifically on that kind of fields, we need to take the innovation coming from the market. So what we've done at EIF, together with the European Commission, that we have been setting a mandate, which is now up and running, which is called the Defense Equity Facility. So what it is, it's a 175 million euros mandate. It may be seen as being small, but this is only a kind of pilot program. This is 175 million to be invested in defense tech. And what will we be doing? Will we only focus on defense specialized players? No, because we are convinced that if we want those companies and those projects to become successful, they have to scale. And in order to scale, they need to be attractive for non-specialized players as well. So we will for sure back specialized funds, but also generalist deep tech funds with a strong focus on defense, but also typical generalist players who, for a reason or the other, have a strong pipeline and the capacity to invest significantly in this area. So do we have
obviously now we mentioned Trump and maybe not being able to put 5% of our BNP into defense of all the countries in Europe, but we can, but do we want to, etc., etc. And Greenland. Do we feel more that we have an urgency in creating this kind of defense technology that actually makes us more tech sovereign in some way? And I wanted to actually go to you, Sebastian, because as a VC in this space, I'm supposed that you have some views on this as well.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Once again, I was here last year, and I'm sitting next to probably the two most important LPs in Europe. One is an LP, and the other one is in due diligence to become an LP, so I'm a bit stuck in a pickle, but I'm going to try it anyway. Generally, these LPs sort of give guidance to where the investment goes. As you heard from David, there are special pots between the EIC run by the EIF or other nations that tend to go into certain verticals, which is a very important task that I can say they take very seriously. And we were a generalist industrial deep tech fund since 2016, and thanks to the NATO Innovation Fund, especially to Patrick and his team, they were able to open up the vertical into defense. Now, I was in the German Bundeswehr in the mountains, but doesn't make me a defense expert. But what we see in defense are extremely mission-driven founders. So you will see they're always the pacifist founders, and we only speak to the founders that come up with great technologies, are sitting in a fantastic university working on R&D, and you'll see a split between the founders of civil and military. And if you look at the military founders, they are extremely dedicated with an incredible conviction, and I can tell you anyone in this room that has dared to be an entrepreneur or start a company from scratch, you definitely need that to survive, in addition to funds that we provide. And what we saw through the help of opening up that market is that there are incredibly good solutions within Europe. If you compare to the United States, we have the benefit of having more primes, and these are organizations that deliver to defense technology. You have Saab here in Sweden, you have Rheinmetall, you've got a few French, Safran, Dassault, and so on. You've got BAE in the UK. You have extremely wonderful mix of very smart organizations and people. Unfortunately, I've been working since 1992 in the same kind of playbook, which I think is now changing when they're opening up into R&D. R&D is 4%, probably currently 3% of the total expenditure in the EU as a number for innovation, and we presume that that number will increase. And if you look at most of these primes, rarely any of them have venture capital, where you say corporate venture capital organization. It's mostly, the French are quite strong in it, having Airbus and Thales and Safran with ventures. But if you look at Germany, not one of them, neither Diehl, nor Hensoldt, nor Rheinmetall, nor OHB has a venture capital unit. So there's a huge market opportunity to help in R&D in Europe.
But is it difficult for European defense tech startups actually? I mean, we have Helsing. It's one company that actually managed to grow kind of big on its own. But otherwise, you're saying that they would have to kind of sell to larger prime, as you're saying, like the bigger companies then in Europe.
So if the question is going more to the US and Europe on fundraising, I think a lot of us know that the US is a very large market. I don't have to say any numbers. But the current administration is cutting them off from Europe, which we will see that they will have to deal with regulation. There's a ITAR, which is called International Traffic in Arms Regulations, which makes it very difficult for American companies then to source outside. And I don't know if you all know, but even Ariane and SpaceX, until recently, had to launch with Russian boosters. They didn't even have the capability themselves to launch into space without those Russian boosters. So technology is a global play. I think Europe has a huge benefit in the picks and shovels. So in the component manufacturing to the larger platforms, I would dare to say the platform strategy, unless there is a central procurement on the defense side or the central investment, it will be very difficult in Europe to build a platform play, because you need every country themselves to buy into that platform.
Patrick, is that what you see across Europe as well? Is it those kind of companies that you are noticing?
I mean, yes, obviously we see a lot of the underlying technologies and a lot of the components, as Sebastian has pointed out, but we're also seeing smaller startups trying to kind of trying to effectively become new defense primes as well. Now, obviously, Europe is more fragmented than the US. It's still a very big market. But just to your point earlier about export controls and so on, I mean, that's always been the case with the US market. And so actually, if you're a European startup that's committed to European defense and security, US is a fantastic market, but if you incorporate there and if you raise money from US VCs, it's going to be very hard to actually sell back into Europe. And so we think many countries in Europe are a great starting point for someone looking to build a large defense tech company. However, yes, as I said before, the market's fragmented. You're not selling to, in NATO, in European NATO, you'd be selling to 30 MODs. As opposed to one in the US, and they have smaller budgets, and there are differences between them. But that was one of the reasons why the NATO Innovation Fund was set up, to drive the adoption of these technologies across NATO and use NATO as a kind of convening force for the adoption. And we have our chief adoption officer here in the room. So if there are any startups who have any questions about that, you can always go to John and ask how we can support when it comes to procurement across European NATO. Unfortunately,
I think we have mainly investors here today, so sorry about that. But David, yeah.
Yeah, one comment on this specific topic of adoption across continents. Being EU focused with European public money, there's also a number of constraints attached to the mandate that we are managing in order to make it European as long as possible. So, for instance, with this mandate that I was referring to, if a fund is financed by this mandate, the companies getting financed by this fund for the first 5 years, for instance, cannot transfer their IP to a non-EU entity. But I think there's a number of constraints which make sense and which already exist in other geographies. So it's applying what we hope to be best market practice in order to foster this segment, because it was a question I had over lunch, that do you see a lot of defense tech funds? So do we see a lot in Europe of defense tech-focused fund?
No, we don't yet. There are a few.
There are a few indeed, and on top of that, it's a kind of a hype as well. Yeah. A lot of people claim that they are deep tech, they want to be defense tech, so we have to make sure, first of all, to whom we are talking and what they want to do and what they can do in a reasonable way. Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously something we think about a lot, and we actually recently released a paper, I guess, listing the 3 things that we think need to happen for more money to go into defense tech. So crowd more private capital into defense tech, and that's something that our Secretary General of NATO has been talking about with the European Commission at length. So I mean, the first thing that we think needs to change is that ESG restrictions around investing in defense and dual use need to be relaxed, and obviously there's been great progress there with the EIB and EIF, but a lot of institutional investors and LPs are still putting restrictions on fund managers when it comes to investing in defense and dual use, and still treating it as if it's a kind of sin stock, as if it's akin to investing in gambling or tobacco or pornography or something like that. And we think that that's wrong, and that's actually quite dangerous. So, we need regulatory change, and also we need cultural change when it comes to thinking about defense.
So in the US, where you think military first, usually when you do it for the defense funds, in Europe we are much more into dual use, and that's obviously, couldn't that also actually be a problem for startups when they actually have like 2 different focuses? I mean, Sebastian, I don't know if you're the best one to answer this, or what do you think? But this is a discussion that's going on, right?
It is, and it has to do with Germany being the largest industrial powerhouse of Europe and has not got to grip with taking its responsibility on this side. I think once you'll see that Germany is better prepared and understands the risks of anything like asymmetric warfare. I mean, it's been going through it since Schröder's government in early 2000. It's not something new. It's always been happening with things like fake news or blackouts or in the internet and the cables.
I just want to say we don't have enough from German government here to actually say anything against this.
No, but I'm saying to your point is that I think Europe is fully aware of the situation, and the dual use is I think a learning curve. It's easier to people that have been living off the, let's say, peace dividend for a lot of years. We're minus 30% in Europe what we're spending on defense since 1992. That's not because we don't want to, it's because we didn't have to. And so I think the dual use is a easier facilitator to get to military first. I think if you would have started with military first, these 2 gentlemen would have had a lot more difficulty getting the funds, and you will see, I'm assuming you will see an involvement going towards outlining what does the kill chain look like, because everyone has no weapons in their contracts.
So, quick question to you then, before I go on to Patrick. Are you for dual use or are you for military first?
I don't like the term dual use because it's an export restriction law. It has nothing to do with a strategy of business.
Okay, but we are cutting down time.
I'm going to contradict your last statement, even though I agree with you. I think dual use is a strategy. It's not a category. So you're not a dual use company. You're an autonomous systems company. You're a materials company. So I understand your question. For early stage startups, it's very hard to pursue two different markets and 2 different customers in parallel. And I think that dual use, obviously historically, made sense as a strategy when there wasn't a big defense tech market. And so, for companies to actually sustain their business and to really grow, they had to pursue a commercial market first, because procurement cycles are long, and demand signals from defense can be challenging and opaque and confusing for startups. But the second point I was going to make before, but from our paper, is that we need reform, and we need governments to become better customers and to actually provide stronger demand signals and be more transparent. And we think once those demand signals are there, and some of the ESG restrictions are lifted, and also investors and founders are pursuing a policy of responsible use and responsible deployment of these technologies, there'll be more trust in defense tech, and more money will be crowded into the system.
Maybe
10 seconds.
Just to complement briefly. So as far as we are concerned, and not to be the one making it difficult, we are focusing on dual use, for a good reason, which is that weapons and ammunition.
So are we,
yeah,
but I'm just talking about it. I know,
and that's why we signed an MOU together to work together, to confirm that we work together, and we'll continue. Dual use, because weapons and ammunition are specifically excluded and are prohibited sectors still for the time being. But the purpose of this pilot I was referring to is very similar to what we did in space a couple of years ago. We had a pilot program of 100 million euros to show that it was money that we could invest, aiming at the highest returns possible, but also having a strong impact on the market, which we did. And the next program, we moved from 100 to 600 million euros secured by the Commission to invest in space and space tech. We aim at doing the same here, showing with this pilot that we can do a good work and good job on the market together with partners like the NIF and others, and hopefully it will result in having much more money available in the next program, which will come in 2-3 years' time. This is, EU institution timeline, so it cannot be quicker than that, unfortunately. But already having this now will help, and we hope that it will unleash additional money and foster the ecosystem.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been so super interesting. I would like to speak about defense for another 20 minutes, but I don't think that Andreas will be very happy with us then. So thank you very much for David, Sebastian, and Patrick for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Today.
It's fantastic to be here.
Thank you.